For those of you I haven't yet had the privilege to meet, my name is Katelyn Emerson. I'm honored to be a concert organist and a teacher, and in my teaching, one of the things I consider to be among the most important topics to discuss are injury prevention and, in the case of those returning to playing after injury or surgery, informed rehabilitation at the keyboard. My training in this realm is primarily in ergonomics, and I consult with hand and occupational therapists to continue to better understand how we do and how we can keep doing what we do. Now, in a quarter of an hour, we can barely scratch the surface of a topic that includes the term lifelong, but hopefully these briefly covered ideas will pique some interest in further discussion. Feel free to pause and rewind any time. I'm going to move rather quickly. The most common causes of injury for us organists fall into two broad categories. Firstly, things we can't really help, such as disease and acute injuries or accidents, like a fall or trauma. Secondly, things we can work to prevent, the more subtle risks. Overuse, which is pushing yourself too far or not allowing enough R&R after practice, and misuse, which includes bad and uninformed technique. Both of these can cause injury, but more often the injury is slow onset, and the source is harder to track, with diagnoses like tendinitis and tennis elbow. So what puts us at risk for these preventable causes? Well, anatomical differences greatly vary our risk. Both organists and organs, of course, come in all shapes and sizes. There is no one size fits or comfortably plays all. A very tall organist might have to adjust the bench to the height where his legs can play the pedals comfortably, and then develops low back discomfort from slouching to reach the keys, on top of knees bruised from hitting the bottom manual. A small-handed organist like myself often refingers and even has to rewrite music to play comfortably. These changes can then be adjusted to suit keyboard players with shortened or missing fingers. Some of us have hypermobility, joints that are super flexible, so we must be careful to not overstretch ligaments. Or hypomobility, where those same ligaments are quite tight, whether because of genetics or as a result of injury, surgery, or disease, and these folks need oversight by a professional to help in loosening. Most of us have varied muscle imbalances because some muscles are overused and compensating, causing weaker muscles to never gain their proper strength to pull their weight. An example of this are the muscles of the shoulders, which for many of us are often raised for working at a computer, then driving in a car, then raised again to reach the third manual, and then over-strengthened by wearing a heavy backpack. These super strong muscles can allow our mid-back muscles to never truly pull their weight to support our core. A little note, in muscular imbalances like this one must first relax and stretch the overworked muscles to tell them to stop, and then begin targeted strengthening of the underutilized muscles so that they can kick in without thought to become a part of the normal movement pattern, slowly and with supervision. But that's another talk. Other risks include, of course, high anxiety, which many of us are particularly experiencing these days, as well as low fitness level, and, once again, overuse and misuse. So knowing that we musicians, like athletes, have anatomical differences as well as unique physical tendencies, how can we mitigate and/or bounce back from a little issue? Keep learning about your body. Nobody can know how you feel better than you do. This includes a little knowledge of which muscles are most often used for the precise motor work that playing needs, as well as where important joints actually are, as opposed to where we think they are. For example, we don't actually have a waist. That's fashion, not anatomy. We bend, or we should bend, at the hip, not at the low back. Remember that you play your body as much as you play the organ, and one continues learning about the instruments that they have at hand. Part of continuing to get to know your body is checking in and using and honing our sixth sense, the kinesthetic sense. This is what allows us to know and to feel where parts of our bodies are, what they are doing, and how they are, without even ever having to look. We can use that sense anytime when practicing and at any time at all to check in, getting to know our body and becoming better aware of the messages it is trying to send, so that we can know when all is well and when something might be wrong. This body awareness allows one to begin to notice any warning signs of pain and discomfort, and we have to react to either of these with respect and, oddly enough, with curiosity. Did the pain start rather suddenly while practicing? Take a break and check in with your body. Change your posture, walk around, see if any of this helps. What were you doing when it began? If the discomfort persists or comes on slowly, check in with a specialist. You know your body and they know the body. Think of any potentially contributing factors. Lifting lots of boxes the day before? Opening a can with a lot of force? Typing? Is your low back hurting because of bad posture on an airplane? We tend to think of practice time as separate or isolated from daily living, but the same body is going through it all. A slower onset injury almost never has a single cause, so working out all possible contributing factors will lead to faster and more complete long-term healing, or prevention? Did an ache appear after a lot of practice without warming up or following a hiatus away from the keyboard? This is most likely some type of muscular discomfort, and one might recover with a little R&R and some breaks in practice. To prevent this, increase the amount of practice time and the intensity of playing gradually. Avoid coming back from a break and practicing a solid 2 or 3 hours. We couldn't do that with running, so why do we think we can do it with playing? Take frequent breaks to allow your body to reset. In fact, always take breaks during your regular practice, just 2 to 3 minutes every half hour or so, walking around the room, going to the bathroom, getting a glass of water. This is all good to avoid dehydration and fantastic for your body. Think of yourself like an athlete. Get out of the awkward seated position you hold while at the keyboard, which is almost the same one you have for more hours in front of the computer, and allow your body to reset. Use mindful repetition in your practice, keeping the brain engaged and sidestepping the mindless repetitive motion that can cause issues. Don't simply repeat something until it happens to fall into being right, but explore ways that will enable you to get it right deliberately, thoughtfully, and efficiently. This can help you to avoid lots of the same fine motor repetition that the little muscles, ligaments, and tendons in our delicate hands and arms simply aren't made to do for hours on end. Again, take a break from the repetition, but continue practicing by thinking of ways to approach a challenging spot differently. Remember, just because the keys aren't sounding doesn't mean you aren't practicing. One of the most common questions I get is, should we warm up? Followed by, how should we warm up? The purpose of warming up is quite literal. We're seeking to increase blood flow to the muscle groups that will be used, thus ensuring they have enough oxygen to function healthfully. We want to move slowly, without motion to the extremes of range or speed, so that this blood flow increases gradually. Think of a pitcher tossing around the ball before practice. He's not yet throwing at full speed, but he's doing motions that he will later perform intensively. So yes, scales and arpeggios can be warm-ups, but playing through all 12 scales in major and minor modes just to check it off the list is far more about practicing scales than about warming up. It is ideal to warm up both your brain and body together so that everybody is ready for practice. In the same way that a choir director's thoughtful warm-ups might include a creative way to approach a challenging chord progression or complex rhythmic sequence of a piece that will be rehearsed, we can parse out a particularly challenging passage. Since we are both director and singers in this little analogy, our brain, the director, remembers the tough bits from last time, pointing them out to the body, the singers, and coming up with a creative way to rehearse it, or directing them to simply practice it slowly. Any motion on the keyboard that is deliberate and easy counts as warming up, so make it enjoyable and productive. A little note, this portion selected for warming up probably shouldn't be something with a lot of hard reaches, unless we're deliberately practicing releasing the muscles that are statically holding open the hand throughout this warm-up, since a hand held open is not a relaxed hand. It might end up restricting that blood flow that we're trying to promote. And remember, warming up need never be solely relegated to the first portion of practice. When diving into a new section that uses a different part of the body or a different technique, start by practicing this slowly. That will get the muscles going as needed and is, by its nature, warming them up. In practice, seek to minimize unnecessary tension throughout the body, from hands to neck, shoulder, jaw, back, and feet. Most of the best players of any musical instrument play with what looks like very little effort. We all know that isn't the case, but this doesn't just come down to talent or natural technique. They have honed their technique down to the most efficient level they can, making economic movements in service to the music, with no excess tension getting in the way of the physical or musical lines. So how can we do that better? Let me give an example. As I sit here in a mostly relaxed posture, many of my muscles are still engaged to keep me upright and not sprawled on the floor. These muscles working on the subconscious level are in what we call tone, doing just what they are meant to do. I want to contrast these muscles in tone to those muscles that are tense, holding for little reason at all besides stress or compensation. Tension is strain, while tone is support, and the latter allows our body to support itself for free motion. Most of us can sit comfortably without our arms raised to the side for extra balance help, so this begs the question, why do many of us lift our shoulders or pinkies to help to depress the keys? Or why do our elbows stick out at odd angles? Or why do our jaw clench as we play? Use this kinesthetic sense to check in during your practice session to see if there's a little excess tension causing a part of your body to be a knot in the smooth rope of movement, and even have a colleague watch you play for an external view. Excess tension might again mean some kind of stress, which we can learn to release, but also might be a sign that some muscles are inefficiently compensating for weaker ones. Just through noticing, you can be the first to become aware of and thus start working on issues caused by tension and catch a problem before it even begins, or simply win the runners-up prize of honing your technique further. Efficient playing is supported, relaxed playing without contribution from muscles that aren't a part of the moment's music making and where the body isn't holding itself tightly against natural or complementary movement. Be cognizant of which manual you're most playing on during practice. As I'm quite short, my practice manual is almost always the lowest manual. Sometimes it can be the choir and sometimes the great. Playing on this manual means that my torso is aligned over my sit bones, my elbows are hanging comfortably, and my wrists are neutral, giving me a great neutral position at which to spend hours punctuated by breaks. In a concert, I'll always use all the manuals available. I may play on the fourth and third manuals, but I won't practice there for long. My shoulders would object. We can go out of the neutral position, but we want to be certain to return to it for the majority of our time at work. For taller folks, this might actually be the second manual, and if you're somewhere in between, split your time between both. Where are your feet while you're practicing? That's a lot of weight hanging off the bench if not supported, even for an organist with excellent posture. So if you're practicing a manualito work, something without pedals, rest them on the pedal board without stops on. Or take stops off the pedals if you're working on manuals for a bit. If pedals are engaged but you aren't playing them for some bars, rest your feet on a footrest, on the bench, or on the swell shoe. And be aware that this is likely an asymmetrical posture, so swap it around and keep from being too static in one position for too long. Therapists rightfully say the best position is the next position, whether at the computer keyboard or the musical one. Is the music desk too high so your neck is extended, or do you have to wear bifocals so it results in the same? I'm short, this does often happen to me. Make certain that during your breaks you move your head around, including looking down, to release the tension in the muscles at the back of your neck. Get glasses with a focal distance correct for practice, so your neck might remain happier for practice hours, even if you need other glasses for services so you can see the conductor at a distance. In the remaining time, I'd like to briefly talk about and then propose some basic stretches which can be done during those breaks to balance ourselves out and release muscles that are likely tight while we hold more static postures at the musical and computer keyboards. We have to continue moving or we can lose mobility, so any age and any time is a great time to add some of these and more. First, a few points about stretching. Slow, hold, no pain. Stretch slowly while listening to your body. Hold the stretch for 2 to 3 seconds, and the most you should feel is a pulling sensation, never pain. There's no competition. We all vary in flexibility. If you feel that any muscles of your body are particularly tight, treat them carefully and with respect, especially those of your arms and hands. I greatly favor what are called active stretches, where we use the muscles of the part of the body being stretched to move the joints, not using an external force to potentially overstretch. For example, we can stretch the muscles on the top of the forearm by simply bending our hand at the wrist joint. I can already feel a stretch just doing this and using the muscles of the arm that is moving. If you use the other hand to help the motion, it's called a passive stretch. For someone like me, who's a little loose-jointed or hypomobile, I can easily go farther than I should if I push with the other hand, potentially causing my ligaments to stretch too much, and we want to stretch muscle. Don't feel the need to do a gigantic list of stretches and exercises if you won't be able to sustain them long term. It's much better to choose just a few at various points in the day or during your practice session and happily do them for years to come, adjusting as you discover which muscles need them most. The most basic 2-for-1 stretch or exercise you can do at any point in the day is to walk around the room while focusing your eyes on a more distant point. This gets your body moving and your eyes relaxed all at once. Stand or sit and breathe deeply for 30 seconds or more with your attention focused inwards. Feel your lungs expand forwards, backwards, and downwards, causing changes in your ribs, diaphragm, and even spinal region as your shoulders remain resting comfortably where they belong. Get out of the slumped position into which you may have sagged with 3 little exercises. Roll your shoulders backwards, feeling that stretch. Move your shoulders blades together, feeling how that changes your body mechanics. And try out a little head retraction to balance out the neck extension many of us are using to look at the music and/or neck flexion that we use to look at our hands and feet. Stretch both arms out to your sides, away from the body where they almost always are. Bring them over your head, following them with your eyes for an added level of attention and eye movement. I hope that you find these ideas and movements to be helpful in your daily living and practice, helping maybe to contribute to long and happy days of practicing to come, even as we ran through them as quickly as possible. Of course, please don't hesitate to write to me with any questions, comments, or if you'd like to work with me on anything I brought up here. Happy practicing!